The Mini Synapse is one of the smallest knives you can get from Vero Engineering and is what I've been carrying for about the last month. So before I even get into the review, this one I have is a little bit different. My friend Daniel let me borrow it and he did customize it. It was naturally canvas micarta, but he actually took the micarta off and dyed it purple since that's his favorite color. I just didn't want anyone jumping off this video halfway through and going to look for the purple version and not finding it. If you're not familiar with the company, it's one of those where there's a designer that makes really cool designs, but then they send it to an OEM and have the OEM actually build it and put their logo on it. Which, I'm not saying that is a bad thing. My go-to pocket knife is from Berg Blades, and they do the same thing. In this case with Vero Engineering, they use Bestech as their OEM, at least for this design, and I think for all of theirs, and they're made in China. So I've handled a fair amount of Bestech knives, but I've never actually owned one for a long-term review. But they all seemed high quality. I've never really seen complaints about Vero Engineering themselves, so I think they do a pretty good job. Some people don't want to buy a knife made in China, which is totally fair, but I wouldn't be concerned about quality in this case. So for the review, I want to start off with my favorite part about this knife, and that is all the different ways you can actually open it. Even though it's a really sleek, minimalist design, there's 3 main ways you can open it. So my preferred way to open pocket knives just in general is a back flipper, which this one has. So the flipper part of this is actually flush with the design, but there is a textured area on top for you to actually get a grip to open it. But since it is flush, the actual bolster that's titanium comes in so you can actually put your finger there, bring it down, and it will open the knife. I found it really easy to use. Normally, most of the knives I carry have the big tab on the back, so I was worried about how easy it would be to hit this or not, but I didn't have any issues with it. It's really intuitive. Like I said, never had any issues with it. Typically, the big tabs are just kind of more idiot-proof. You don't really have to be used to using a back flipper to make one work, but it would have ruined the design of this knife, so I'm glad they figured out a way to make this work. So the next way you can open this knife is as a front flipper. So I've never actually had a front flipper before. I'm pretty awkward at it. Like, I can do it slowly. My friend that owns this, that's how he typically opens it from what I saw, and he made it look really easy. So I think that's mostly a me issue. So what they did is there are serrations here that you can use to operate the front flipper part of it. And the final way to open it is, I believe what they wanted you to do is use this as a flick tab, which a lot of people like doing that. I mean, it looks cool, and it's fun to fidget with. I don't have it down where I did it every time, because I haven't played around with it a ton using it that method. Like I said, I normally use the back flipper, but it's not bad to do. Every once in a while I mess it up, though. But what you can also do is place your thumb there and do a half circle and open it kind of like you would a Spyderco, where it's that half sweep. Or you can use the tab that you use to actually flick it and just grab it to open it, typically, like you would an old school knife. So the cutout in the blade where you would flick it open is where I do have a minor complaint out of any of these. So the groove is actually slightly hidden by the handle of the knife. Not by much, just by a little bit, but I wish they either could have brought it up or over, something so it's not partially hidden. So design-wise it looks fine, but it makes it a little harder to hit. With some practice, it's probably totally fine. I just found it a little bit awkward to get to. It might just not be possible with the design, like it would have weakened the blade, but it seems like it would have been a nice adjustment. So the other complaint I have here is that it is right-handed only for that operation. If you look on this side and you wanted to do it with your left hand, there's just not that little cutout there. So I am left-handed. I have more dexterity with my left hand. So to sit here and fidget with it, I would have liked it to be left-hand friendly, but I'm also aware this is their right-handed model, and they do have a left-handed model where it's on the other side. But because most knives are made for right-handed people, I typically carry with it on my right side. I know this design just wouldn't work being ambi, because it's a thick enough cutout it would have gone all the way through the blade, and that probably would have made it weaker, but more importantly, I think it being cut out totally would have just not looked as nice. And a huge part of this knife is that it is just a good looking knife. Like I said, very minor. There's not a lot of people who are left-handed that carry on their right side, so that's probably just a me complaint. But I don't have a lot of negatives with this, so that is something I wanted to point out. Now for the other parts of this. It is a drop point blade, a little bit under 3 inches. It's a belt finish in a flat grind, and it's M390. As a daily user EDC, you really can't go wrong with that. It's a pretty standard setup. They didn't do anything fancy with it, and I really enjoyed using it. All I did was stuff around the house, but for a knife this size, you're not going to be doing anything extreme with it, so that's really all I needed it to do. One thing that I do really like about the blade, though, is there's not all of the tacky logos all over it. It's very clean. Besides for the cutout for the flicking deployment, there's nothing on there. The only markings on there are going to be on the top of the spine. You can see where it says Vero. And if you're handling the knife, you can't even really see these, so it's a really clean look. So for mechanical quality, everything lots up really well. It feels really tight. Everything's nice and centered. I didn't see anything wrong at all as far as quality goes with that. There are some small cosmetic dings and little scratches and stuff like that, but my friend that actually owns this knife is pretty hard on his knives. He doesn't baby them at all, and I'm the exact same way, and I've been using exclusively this as my pocket knife for a month now, so it's definitely not had an easy life. So I'm guessing all of those are just from us. I have had knives that look like absolute garbage after you use them for a few weeks, so I'm glad that this one's held up pretty well. Like I said, there's some minor wear, but it's nothing major. You have to really look for it. So the micarta and titanium has aged pretty gracefully. So working back on the knife, the actual bolster itself is made from titanium. I've really liked every knife I've had that uses titanium, and the finish they use is a really nice contrast from the blade and the pivot itself. So I think it's a really good look. For the locking mechanism, it is a frame lock. And they do have a slight cutout, so when you put your thumb in there to actually activate that, to unlock the knife, it's pretty easy to get to. I never even had to think about what I was doing when I went to unlock it, so that's great. That's one of those things you don't want to have to think about it. Now for the grip itself, when I hold it, my pointer and my middle finger sit into this groove here. And then my other two fingers sit on the flat part of the handle. I do wear large gloves. I could see if you wear anything larger than that, you might end up having a 3-finger grip, because my pinky just barely fits on there. So when you're actually grabbing it, when I force myself to use my non-dominant hand, which is my right hand, the clip basically disappears. It's very comfortable. Well, besides from the fact that I'm making myself use my non-dominant hand. When I hold it in my left hand, the clip isn't bad, just the place I grab it at, where the clip sticks up at the end, it's jabbing into the side of my pointer finger, which it's not uncomfortable. It just makes it from really nice down to average. Like, it's not painful or anything. It's just when I'm being judgmental thinking about a review, it is something I noticed. And obviously, if your hands are a slight bit smaller, your finger probably goes on top of that clip. Or if they're slightly bigger, they would be beyond it. Or if you just hold your hand at a slightly different angle, like if I slightly adjust it, it doesn't do that. Just where my hand naturally goes, it does. I wouldn't let that stop you from buying the knife. It is just something to be aware of. So the pocket clip itself is a pretty nice design. Where it flares out, where I complained about that sticking into my finger, it does make it a lot easier to put it in and out of your pocket, just because it gives you a bigger area to work with. I didn't have any retention issues once it was on my pocket. it didn't move at all. And when I pulled it out of my pocket, there wasn't any areas where it seems like it would rip up the top of your pocket like a lot of knives will. So really no complaints with that whatsoever. And it is a pretty clean design. It basically fits with the flow of the wrestling knife, where it does just have that V that says Vero on it. So that is the only real brand marking you can see when the knife is closed up like this. I think that's a lot classier looking than the giant logo on the blade, so I'm glad they went with that approach. I've seen way too many knives where the design itself is awesome and the clip just looks like an afterthought, but it seems like they really spent some time trying to make sure this matched up with everything else on the knife, so I appreciate that from a design perspective. So another thing that's really cool about this knife is there's a lot of aftermarket support. Well, maybe not aftermarket, but from the company itself. There's quite a few options to change out the scales, the clip, and the backspacer. They even have Damascus options, so if you like that more colorful look, they do have that as well. And another thing you can do like this one here is dip the natural canvas micarta, take it off and dye it whatever color you want as long as it's a little bit of a darker color. So you can really make it a one-on-one knife. And if you're worried about what it takes to actually customize it, all the screws are T8 and they're all really easy to get to. So it's not a bad swap whatsoever. So the final thing I want to talk about is the price. This new run will start at $335 and goes up from there. And from what I've seen, if you find it on another website, it will be about another 25 bucks. So for value, for the materials, you can go cheaper than that. I'm sure you can find something with micarta or some equivalent with a 390 blade for cheaper than this one is. But what you're really paying for is the design and the build quality. So if you really like the design and all the mechanisms, I think it's a pretty decent value. Like I said, not the cheapest thing you can get, but you're buying it for the design, not the materials themselves. So if you are interested in it, one thing to be aware of is it's one of those companies where they just do it in runs. So not everything on their website's available all the time. So if you're wanting one, you probably need to sign up for their newsletter or follow them on social media or do something where you can see when the new knives are coming out. Like I think for this exact model, they have one coming out pretty soon. So if you're seeing this video right when I'm posting it and you want one, you'll probably have a chance here relatively soon. And if you think this one is too small, they do have a larger version of the same model, and they have a left-handed version if you're a lefty. None of them are ambi. It's either left-handed or right-handed. You can't get both. And that wraps up this review. Thank you for watching.